And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our exciting afternoon. We're very much looking forward to these next sets of presentations. Right up now, improving large truck safety in work zones. So let's welcome from FHWA, Martha Kapitanoff, to come up as our moderator. Martha, please turn on your camera and mic and join me on the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, improving large truck safety in work zones is very near to my heart. We have been joining forces with NHTSA, Federal Motor Carrier, and other stakeholders to improve commercial motor vehicle safety in work zones. And have asked a few stakeholders today to share some great that can help you improve large truck safety or commercial motor vehicle safety in work zones. So we have three great presenters today. Our first presenter being Melissa Finley. She is a senior research engineer in the Operations and Roadway Safety Division of the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. In her 25-year career, Melissa has led projects totaling over $12 million in research funding, authored over 55 reports, published 30 peer-reviewed papers, and made numerous presentations on her research findings. Her primary areas of expertise include work zone safety and operations, runway driving, traffic control measures and devices, and STEM K-12 educational outreach. Melissa received her Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in civil engineering from Texas A&M University. She's a registered professional engineer in the state of Texas. After Melissa, we'll have William Bremer. He is part-time senior transportation civil engineer in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, where he has been working in the Traffic Operations and Safety Lab for the past 7 years. He retired from the Federal Highway Administration in 2012 and spent his last 35 years there serving as the Wisconsin Division Highway Safety Engineer. After Bill, we'll have Kirsten Ragewagen. She is the lead marketing specialist in the Office of Outreach and Education at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. In addition to leading Federal Motor Carrier's Work Zone Safety Outreach Initiative, she also oversees the agency's flagship national public awareness campaign and partnership, Our Roads, Our Safety. Kirsten has been with the U.S. Department of Transportation for 7 years. Prior to working at USDOT, Kirsten worked at the Peace Corps headquarters as their senior marketing specialist. She was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Bulgaria and worked in community economic development. Speakers, please join the stage, and we'll start with Melissa. Thank you.
There goes my camera. It wasn't working at first, so we're up and running now. This afternoon, I just want to spend a little bit of time as we go through this just to provide you an overview of some of the activities we've been cooperating with FHWA and the other partners that Martha mentioned dealing with CMV safety in work zones. And one thing I wanted to do is start out with a definition just to let you know what we mean when I'm speaking of commercial motor vehicles. And this is a definition that's been agreed upon by FHWA, FMCSA, and NHTSA. And it's looking at vehicles with a gross weight or a gross combination weight of 10,001 pounds or more. And then when we're talking about work zones, we are looking at areas of the roadway where construction, maintenance, or utility work is working. So that's a pretty standard definition for those of you familiar with work zones, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page as we get started here this afternoon. Quickly, I wanted to highlight some of the statistics for you. In 2019, we saw that there were 762 fatal work zone crashes. Of those, when you compute these numbers I'm showing you on the screen, 33% of those crashes involved a commercial motor vehicle, and then 35% of the fatalities in work zones involved a commercial motor vehicle. And again, that's when you combine those truck involved and bus involved statistics that are showing here on your screen. And I did, as you'll be able to reference these slides later, I provided a link here to a page on the Clearinghouse where you can obtain these statistics as well as many more. Next slide. So as we see here in this graph, we have a trend of commercial motor vehicle involved fatal work zone crashes. And unfortunately, we can see that it's increasing year by year. as we look from 2010 to 2019. For comparison purposes, I just want to mention that commercial motor vehicle involvement in non-work zone fatal crashes has remained fairly constant throughout the same time period at about 10 to 13% of all the fatal crashes. So a lot of times you may hear Martha say, or even Jerry, my colleague, or myself say that commercial motor vehicles are overrepresented in fatal work zone crashes. And that's why we say that, because we're looking here again in 2019, about 32.8, or as I mentioned, 33% of those were in work zones where commercial motor vehicle involved. Whereas, again, the ones that are in non-work zones are around 10 to 13%. Another graph that I want to show you is just how the commercial motor vehicles are involved in fatal crashes by facility type. So this is looking at data just from 2017 to 2019. And again, I'll point out that these graphs are available on the Clearinghouse webpage, so you can look at them later as well. But we want to see kind of where these crashes are happening and where they're overrepresented. So in this graph I'm showing here, the orange columns are the work zone fatal crashes, and the white columns are the non-work zone fatal crashes. But these are all commercial motor vehicle involved. And so as we can see, tends to be over all the facilities that we have that overrepresentation, but we see the largest overrepresentation on the interstates in both urban and rural environments. In fact, CMVs are involved in more than 30% of the fatal work zone crashes on urban interstates and more than 50% of the fatal work zone crashes on rural interstates. Now, I'll point out with some of this data things that we're not accounting for. We are not accounting for how much work is going on out there. That obviously varies from year to year. It's not accounting for commercial motor vehicle traffic or volume. We don't know if this is due to having more work, having more volume. What about the deliveries in and around the construction zone? And we just know that work zones are more challenging possibly for commercial motor vehicles to negotiate when we think about the fact that we change geometries, we change alignments, we change lane widths, etc. But these are just snippets of information for you to be thinking about the trends, why this is an important issue, why we're having this conversation today in this session, and some of the areas that we might want to focus on as far as facility types. Now then, a couple of listings that you might be interested in, some of which will be talked about actually in our next session and in this session. So there's some work zone safety grant products that are out there. They're listed here. Some are fact sheets, some are different publications or presentations and brochures. But the LMS modules are going to be, I believe, discussed in part 2 of the work zone safety grant sessions, which is following this session at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then, as Martha mentioned, we're going to be discussing this University of Wisconsin-Madison Work Zone Designer Series piece here in this session today. So there's a lot of materials out there that you can access on the Clearinghouse to give you information about strategies that can help hopefully impact or reduce CMV crashes in work zones. Another thing that FHWA has been doing, next slide please, thank you, is holding webinars and various meetings and symposiums. We tend to have a session at this type of conference every time we hold it about large truck safety or commercial motor vehicle safety. And we also highlight issues dealing with commercial motor vehicle safety at National Work Zone Awareness Week. And obviously all of that can be targeted at the commercial motor vehicles themselves or at the passenger car drivers. So one thing I failed to point out when I was talking about the statistics was that not all of these crashes are the at fault is the CMV. We know that sometimes it is a commercial motor vehicle hitting another vehicle, but in other instances, it is the other vehicle hitting the commercial motor vehicle. So we need to be making sure that when we're talking about this, when we're engaging with stakeholders, that we're looking at all sides and all pieces of the puzzle. And we want to make sure that we're educating and involving and trying to look at ways to mitigate those crashes from the passenger car driver, from the truck driver or the CMV driver, to the DOTs and the state agencies, to police, and bringing all those stakeholders in on the conversation. And we do that through these mechanisms shown on the screen, through meetings and symposiums and some publications we do during National Work Zone Awareness Week. So what are we doing right now? One thing that I wanted to spend time highlighting a little bit, and some of you from these opportunity states are well aware of these items that have been going on, but back in 2018, FHWA asked a team of researchers to review the NHTSA FARS data and to identify 10 states with the highest number of fatal work zone crashes and associated work zone fatalities. And that's what you're seeing here in the graph. These are our opportunity states. And in 2019, we held several events with those opportunity states to discuss the issue, to review the characteristics of these types of incidents, to look at what agencies were doing, to share experiences, and to identify other resources that might be needed to help mitigate the issue. We're also in the process of helping FHWA formulate a voluntary action plan that can be used for a variety of stakeholders to look at how they can implement strategies to mitigate these types of crashes again. Then what we're doing now is we are actually, next slide, please. We are actually conducting targeted state level efforts to promote CMV safety in work zones with these opportunity states. So we actually have conducted 9 of the 10 workshops. We are planning our last one for November. Based on the discussions at these workshops, so they're held virtually. We usually hold them over a 2-day period, 4 hours one day and 4 hours the second day. We invite people in to speak. We have the stakeholders speak about what they're doing right now, dealing with work zone safety that may impact commercial motor vehicles and passenger car drivers, to things they're doing with CMVs that may, run over into work zones and help the safety there, as well as things they're specifically doing to target commercial motor vehicle safety within a work zone. And so we take all that conversation, we identify maybe strategies where they need to expand, or they want to go to the next step, or work on some specific aspect of it that they found challenging, or maybe there's completely new strategies that we explain to them based on all the guidance documents and the fact sheets and these trainings that we have that they want to try. And so we take all that information, we develop a workshop summary report specific for that state, and we develop a state action plan for that state that gives the stakeholders, again, a variety of stakeholders that we invite to these, different ideas about how they can promote and continue to address this issue and work together to do that. Now, for those of you that aren't in these opportunity states and aren't getting this kind of one-on-one engagement, we are going to be conducting a webinar in December to share some of the general workshop findings and recommendations with stakeholders. So be on the lookout for some information coming soon about that, and make sure you join that if you're interested. Next slide. Last but not least, I just wanted to leave you with some online resources. Again, knowing that you'll be able to see this presentation and recording. Here are some links to some websites that you might be interested in visiting. Again, the 4th bullet down is that Improving Large Truck Safety page, and that's where I was able to get some of the data, and there's links there and places that you can continue to look for some of those documents I mentioned. And then bring your attention to the FMCSA links here. I'm sure Kirsten will explain this some more, as I think this is part of her presentation, but we like to highlight those anytime we talk about CMV safety in work zones. So next slide. That is all I have for this afternoon, and I appreciate your time. Martha, I'll hand it back over to you.
We'll have all 3 presenters share their presentation, and then we will have time for questions. But in the meantime, feel free to use the chat box and enter your questions. Next, we'll have, please come to the stage and start with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Good afternoon. So this afternoon, I'll be discussing the planning and design accommodation for oversized and overweight freight in work zones. This is a sub-element of large trucks, but it's a growing phenomenon, I guess, or trend in this country of the increasing amount of oversized and overweight trucks. We start the presentation with a little acknowledgement that this work is part of our Federal Highway Administration Work Zone Safety Grant Program. And the disclaimer is, of course, that the opinions that are discussed here are those not of the Federal Highway Administration or the U.S. Department of Transportation, but rather our work done here at the Traffic Operations and Safety Lab. Any trademarks manufacturers are just for the consideration essential to the objective of the topic. Next slide, please. Okay, to start the discussion, we'll talk about some of the different players involved. And the first is, of course, the United States Department of Transportation and the federal involvement on truck freight routes. We know that there's about 4.1 million miles of highways and streets in the United States, and federal laws and rules address truck safety or truck size, length and width on about 200,000 miles, of which those are the highest quality highways. Included in that 200,000 is 47,000 miles of the interstate system. In addition to the length and width, the interstate also has some weight rules involved. Federal rules allow the states to impose reasonable restrictions on these federal truck routes without getting federal highway approval and on the network. And that certainly includes work that is done as far as construction zones. The most recent federal legislation that we have working with is the 2015 Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. That FAST Act included truck route funding, and it also requires that the states develop highway freight plans by 2017, of which all the states complied. What bring your attention or notice is that in that requirement, as far as developing those highway freight plans, that there was no mention of oversize and overweight, and it's not specifically included anything in the act. However, I'll point out that some states did take that opportunity when they were preparing their plans, that they did discuss oversize and overweight. Next slides, please. Now we'll talk a little bit about the state responsibilities and to ensure safety and mobility. And I think point out to you that in this presentation this afternoon, that we will not only be talking about safety, but also mobility and how they work together as far as oversize, overweight. All states have laws and regulations setting their own size and weight limits for vehicles, as long as they have to be consistent with applicable federal regulations. The interesting, we see the truck trailer there on the screen, is that at the federal level, it's a minimum of 48 feet for the trailer. Many states have much longer, quite typically 53-foot trailers and so forth. However, the maximum width on our trucks are 8 foot 6 inches. Also point out that there is no federal mandated for height of vehicles. I think a lot of this has to do with, because of the interstate development back started in the 50s, that bridges were typically with standards were built at 16 feet. However, some states have higher and some states lower as far as height is concerned. So just because the interstate is typically built with 16-foot clearances, that doesn't mean anything or doesn't pertain to the what a state may do as far as their legal height limits. The interstate system, of course, has 80,000 pound weight restrictions. Next slide, please. So why is oversized overweight a topic is relevant to our work zone designers? The truck freight movement is, first off, is vital to all state economies, and this includes the oversized and overweight vehicles that are traveling in through their state highways. And so it really is economies of all of our states. Certainly a very, very important segment of our freight movement. Just to point out that this is one of the fastest growing segments in the truck freight industry. And over a 10-year period, recently, study done by General Accounting Office, that was a 26% on average growth nationally in the number of oversized and overweight vehicles that are traversing our highways. These are some states have more, some states less growth, but as a matter of fact, one state has a 50% growth. And this information was gathered based on the number of permits issued by the individual states. We'll talk about that in a minute. So it's very, very important for the states to ensure that oversized, overweight freight is not impacted severely during our construction work zones. And so we'll talk about that as we move forward. Next slide, please. One of the things that we will talk about a lot is that states, all of the states have oversized and overweight permits. So when somebody, a carrier wants to have a overweight load, they need to get their permits from their individual states. And the states have the sole responsibility to issue these in the state. There's no federal permits required as far as oversized, overweight. These are our state responsibilities. Oversized, overweight permitting process, we know, are complex, and every state has their own laws, regulations, and processes for requesting and issuing their permits. Some states have as few as 1 or 2 different types of oversized, overweight permits. Some states have more than 20 different types of permits that they require, different types depending on the load and so forth. Next slide. So we think that designers need some basic knowledge about their oversized and overweight state permit rules and procedures in their states in which they're designing their work zones. Designers need to know what types of permits are out there. Is it a single trip permit? In other words, it's good. The permit is only good for one load, or do some states allow multiple trip permits that could be for extended period of time, maybe a year, for instance. They could haul numerous loads with certain types of routes and so forth. And then designers need to know that kind of information. One of the things they need to know is what is the notification requirements to their permit holders for multiple trip permits holders, especially. That's critical. And how do you notify these oversized, overweight permit holders that they need to know what's changing out there? In other words, what's going on with your work zones. Next slide, please. So how is oversized, overweight freight typically dealt with in our work zones? Rerouting or detouring oversized, overweight is often a good option for accommodation, and there's nothing wrong with that. And as frequently, that is the process that many states try to reroute or detour their oversized, overweight to avoid their construction zones. But it may not always be physically possible or economically reasonable. As an example, for instance, of what does economically mean? How far can they require oversized loads to be detoured? Then how it comes into how many loads they're talking about, what kind of restrictions are there? Is it physically possible for these loads to be detoured? Bridge loadings, tunnels, for instance, examples of types of things that may be a challenge for detouring. So we have to take a look at this as we're developing our projects. Next slide, please. To start with, we think it's a good technique is the communication and coordination. We'll talk about that in just about any of our types of things is if you've got good communication and partnerships with the players involved, that your chances of improving your processes are much improved. We think it's important for the oversized, overweight that our infrastructure planning and program development units and have an understanding and working relationship with their oversized and overweight permit issuing agency in each of their states. About a little over half of the states, those permit issuing agencies reside within the Department of Transportation, but there are many states that they're in another agency within the state. It could be in revenue, could be in police agencies and so forth. But so I think we think it's important that there be a partnership established And we think it's a noteworthy practice is that that coordination and partnership, if you will, is documented. And how does that coordination take place between the infrastructure planning as well as the program development units within each of the DOTs. Next slide, please. Just a couple examples of common oversized, overweight freight, what it looks like. Certainly, we all recognize that our construction equipment, manufactured work zone equipment, or construction equipment it fits into this category. But there is a number of other types of very common oversized, overweight. Next slide, please. We see agriculture, planting and harvesting equipment, raw forest products. We know that for instance, examples of one of the growth is that as the agriculture industry, that the planting equipment, harvesting equipment is getting larger. And as a result, it is expensive and it's used in multiple places and needs to be transported. But also we all have see a lot of growth in other types of oversized, overweight, such as wind energy. We see modular home development increasing. We see energy, gas and oil equipment having to be hauled. So there's just a lot of different types of equipment that is being moved, as it does require a permit. Next slide, please. So we think even at the early stage of program planning for projects that oversized, overweight has some discussion in the development of which projects and timing of which projects are done, and this included oversized, overweight with the schedule of all other user groups. In other words, the things that other people that are types of projects or when they're going to be done, and we think that oversized, overweight should be included in that. At discussion even at the planning stage of which projects go first and what order and so forth. To do some of these things, a number of states have been looking and using different types of products that they have in their planning divisions and so forth as a starting point for oversized, overweight, as in the discussion of all of these other groups that are considered about when projects are built. As I mentioned, some of the states did include in their state freight plans oversized, overweight. If that is available in your state, that's a good starting point. Some states have talked about critical route pairs. State of Oregon, for instance, developed critical route pairs as a policy that if they're going to be doing some construction on one route, that the critical route pair, that they will try not to have construction at the same time on that parallel route. Then also some states have developed what they refer to in their planning as preferred oversized, overweight route plans. Next slide, please. State of Wisconsin has developed several different types of corridors for different types of oversized, overweight. You see the picture on the right representing the wind energy of hauling, transporting the bases and towers, and as well as the blades, different types of loads. Just as the state has, in the planning stage, looked at different types of routes for different types of freight. There is a separate plan for overheight types of oversize, and you look at the map, they typically don't necessarily include overheight on the interstate because of the greater number of underpasses that the interstate has. So a lot of different routes for several different route plans. So if our designers have work on one of these, that they take a look and see, is there accommodation, or how far is is it going to be impacting their oversized and overweight types of loads that they have on their system. Next slide, please. Okay, let's now focus on individual projects and project transportation management plan, TMPs, and the development. And obviously for all of our TMPs, our goal is that we have no surprises during the construction phase, minimize those, eliminate or the need to issue change orders, And that includes any change orders that might be due because of oversized overweight that somebody didn't catch it at the stage of the notifying the scene that the how it may impact the oversized and overweight industry. We think a good practice is that include the oversized overweight stakeholders. There are trade associations in many states, as well as there's some major carriers, and that they should be involved along with all other stakeholders in the TMP development stage, and to have that included in their discussions. We think that oversized overweight is when their detour routes are evaluated, that you consider those. Next slide, please. So evaluating alternate detour routes, what are the existing size and weight restrictions on any proposed or considered detour? Are there overhead obstructions? Look at intersections that may be bottlenecks, any restrictions due to construction plans on those alternate or detour routes. Next slide, please. Work zone geometric and strategies. These are a list of all of the different types, many of the different types of traffic management techniques we use on our for our work zones, and some have more of a challenge than others as far as if there's going to be any issues with handling oversized and overweight. Next slide, please. One of the ways that we want to perhaps maybe take a look at oversized overweight is when we can do our scheduling of our projects. For instance, we know right now we're doing a lot more night construction or time of day to avoid mitigate congestion, and certainly this is may very well work well for oversized overweight. I put a caution here, however, that as designers, you need to know that oversized overweight permits may use a different type of time as far as daylight for when those permits are good, as well as in our contracts, we may use a clock time for when certain operations can take place. So that is something that has to be worked out. We think at the TMP to either then restrict when the permits are valid and or when the work can be done. Some states have experimented with day of week operations. In other words, they do all of the restrict the amount of traffic or work zone oversized overweight, let's say Monday through Thursday, and then get off the road and let the traffic, let's say Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that may also work well for mitigation for our regular traffic. So there's different types of things that if these are established and can be put into place at the TMP, that they'll work well for all of our projects. Next slides, please. Several different strategies for accommodating different types of loads. For over width vehicles, differential lane and shoulder widths, we can use that, adjusting lane widths with temporary traffic control devices, and then they can be moved easily to accommodate the oversized overweight when it comes through. We have new technologies and equipment that even can move, positive protection equipment. It works well for time of day and so forth, and it helps very useful for oversized overweight. Next slide, please. Here's some, again, some common over width vehicles and how that by changing the lane widths and using available shoulder widths that may very well work very well for our oversized and overweight, and we don't have to necessarily detour the oversized loads. Next slide, please. We know that there are some states that we mentioned that shifting traffic to one side of the roadway is often used or can be used. We caution that they need to take a look at the types of loads and what kind of widths can be accommodated, especially if there's positive protection on one side and permanent protection on the other side that may interfere. States also can not try to detour necessarily some certain types of loads, for instance, like modular homes. They would just as soon keep it on. Their policy is to try to maintain sufficient width on their projects so that the certain loads do not have to detour off, because they're more of a hindrance if they get off of the route that they're used to traveling, and cause more challenges on those detour routes. Next slide, please. Strategies for overlength. There's a number of things here on this list that I point out that may serve value, that ways to try to accommodate overlength vehicles. Next slide, please. Overweight, they are perhaps maybe the biggest challenge, trying to find acceptable detour routes, especially if they're very heavy vehicles that loads on off project detour routes may be a challenge. And so there's different kinds of strategies that may be valuable, and working with the agents, the permit agency, to try to accommodate that oversized, overweight loads. Next slide, please. Over height vehicles, there's a number of different strategies that agencies are using and have used, as far as different types of false work, changing the plans, using telltale systems, warning systems, diverting over height loads onto lanes with sufficient higher clearances, and so forth. And again, coordination and communication with a permit agency, that those get into the permits. Next slide. So in conclusion, the oversized, overweight stakeholders are important to our highway users, and they need an equal TMP design consideration included in their discussion as we develop our TMPs. So again, the important thing here is the timely communication and coordination with the state permit granting agencies, as well as our stakeholders throughout the TMP design process, will go a long way for implementing a successful project. Last slide, please. So as Andy Bill mentioned yesterday, this presentation is based on a design series publication that we finished. It's now up on the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse, and this is you can enter just searching by UW-Madison and finding our design series publication. Thank you.
I do not see any question posted. Again, we will go over Q&A after Kirsten's presentation. So Kirsten, would you please join us and start your presentation? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten Radowagen, and I'm the lead marketing specialist with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. As part of the Office of Outreach and Education, I manage Pardon? Oh, sorry about that. As part of the Office of Outreach and Education, I manage some of the agency's high visibility awareness campaigns, including the Our Roads, Our Safety campaign, which you may have heard of. And it's actually the umbrella campaign that our Work Zone Safety Outreach Initiative falls under, which is new this year. And I'm happy to be here today talking to you about that. So here you can see a quick campaign snapshot at large. At the end of 2020, FMCSA headquarters provided to our division states our division offices in the top 10 opportunity states an internal opportunity to propose a plan for heightened outreach regarding work zone safety in their state. After we reviewed all of the submissions and we determined the participating states, we held off a kickoff meeting in January, and we began a regular stakeholder meetings with the division offices and their safety state DOTs and other safety stakeholders they identified through January through April, which is when the campaign launched. At the same time, our team was planning tactics, building state-specific messaging, and producing materials to support a new landing page, organic outreach, and a paid media effort. The campaign kicked off in April during National Work Zone Awareness Week, and it ran through right past Labor Day. And monthly, we reported out on performance to the states and provided insights and optimizations for campaign improvement. We received a wide range of proposals, and ultimately we decided that we could support all of the submissions, and the following states participated: Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and Texas. And again, these 6 states were based on the fact that they were the ones that provided submissions to this this internal funding opportunity that FMCSA headquarters gave them. So Texas, Florida, and Georgia requested targeted marketing campaigns, while Arkansas and Oklahoma requested additional work zone safety signage at select way stations, and Pennsylvania requested work zone safety materials to be developed with content specific to their state that they would be distributing at workshops that they were holding with new CDL holders. After we held the kickoff meeting with the participating division offices, we determined that the campaign would occur in 3 phases. So phase 1 was the discovery and development phase. This is what happened during the first part of 2021, where we spent a lot of time learning about each state, gathering data points and to support the campaign, and building the shareable assets and campaign assets. Phase 2 was the National Work Zone Awareness Week launch, when all outreach, both paid and organic, took place during that National Awareness Week. And phase 3 was heightened awareness and education. Essentially, this was the continued support we gave to the field with regular outreach communications, additional paid media opportunities, and more throughout the late spring and summer. Ultimately, through this outreach initiative, we set out to, number 1, educate and remind all road users, with an emphasis on the CMV industry, how to safely drive through work zones. Number 2, arm CMV drivers with tips on sharing the roads safely with other drivers in work zones. And number 3, we really wanted to position FMCSA as a safety partner at the state and local level and help foster collaboration between our agency and local stakeholders. Throughout the entirety of the pilot, we knew we'd lean a lot on the division offices to use their relationships with state safety stakeholders to help get the word out about this campaign, and also to collect the data we needed to make informed decisions and create the content within the resources that are now available for download. Early on in the project, we invited state DOTs, state trucking associations, and law enforcement partners at times to our ongoing meetings to collaborate and identify opportunities for our content to get into the hands of those drivers. We worked very closely with our division administrators and their teams to build those relationships with these folks and have them help disseminate our important safety messages and materials to their networks. And so here on this slide, you can just see a sampling of the various organizations that we worked with closely during the development of the campaign. As I just mentioned, with much collaboration from the states, FMCSA field office, and other state DOTs and other stakeholders, we were able to build a suite of materials for this initiative with state-specific content. So we used the research and data sourced from these states to build individual one-pagers for each of the 6 participating states, alongside general content such as postcards, visor cards, tip sheets, and PowerPoint slides that any state could use, whether they're participating or not in this initiative, when they're talking about work zone safety. Other materials we helped build for consumption are earned media toolkits for Texas, Florida, and Georgia, alongside a general toolkit, And these toolkits include a sample press release, pitch email, and talking points for anybody to use. Again, state specific for Texas, Florida, Georgia, but then general toolkits that any state could use. Also, we developed social media playbook, again, specific for Texas, Florida, and Georgia, and then another general one that any state could use. And those playbooks include recommended posting strategies, social media graphics, and messages in both Spanish and English. And all materials, of course, are up on the Our Roads, Our Safety website and available for download at any time. As I mentioned earlier, we received a range of proposals from states that wanted to participate in this outreach initiative. So here you can see our division, some photos of the way station signage that our division's offices in Arkansas and Oklahoma had requested. And then here you can see a sample of the materials that we developed for Pennsylvania's SEED workshop. SEED stands for Safety Education and Entrepreneurial Development, which is an existing workshop that they have for new entrants, and they incorporated work zone safety information to that audience. From a paid media perspective, as mentioned earlier, we ran ads across Florida, Georgia, and Texas work zone hotspots that included digital billboards and audio ads. The audio ads ran across various streaming platforms such as Spotify, Pandora, and SoundCloud. And during National Work Zone Awareness Week, we also boosted social media posts on Facebook nationwide to heighten awareness and exposure of our messages. Throughout the summer, we continued to see billboards come online, and in total, we ran 15 billboards across the 3 states with the marketing campaigns through the end of July. So that's April through July. And now I want to just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the results and insights from our awareness efforts. The campaign wrapped up right after Labor Day and reached nearly 26 million people with work zone safety messaging, with a majority of those impressions coming from our billboards in Florida, Georgia, and Texas. We saw nearly 6,000 engagements on Facebook and more than 8,000 page views on the website. Between both our organic and paid outreach efforts, we've had about 3,500 downloads of our materials. And top materials that were downloaded include the National Work Zone Awareness social media graphics, which were downloaded 572 times. And after that, our tip sheet was downloaded 569 times. So while we learned a lot from this program, and again, this was just our first year, and we kind of saw this as a pilot initiative, a pilot program for outreach, work zone safety outreach that we do hope to expand moving forward. Here are the three key takeaways. Paid advertising expands reach. Using a healthy mix of digital billboards, audio placements, and social media advertising, the campaign efficiently reached motorists across Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Number 2, billboards deliver big results. Billboards accounted for more than 90% of the impressions. Digital billboards were an affordable, efficient, and smart medium for this campaign. Of course, reaching people on the roads as they may approach or enter a work zone is a great way to spread our important safety message, and of course, very timely in that they're approaching the work zone. And number 3, there definitely is an appetite for shareable materials. So from the launch in April through campaign end in September, users continued to visit our work zone safety pages and download the materials as needed. And as I mentioned, we really saw this as a pilot initiative. This was our first time doing a campaign like this and approaching it in terms of work zone safety outreach. And we do hope to expand this more broadly. So thank you for your time today. If you have any questions or you're interested in learning more about how you can work with FMCSA and work zone safety, or quite frankly, If you have any, if there are any opportunities you'd like to collaborate with us in terms of CMV safety more broadly, I'm always happy to hear any of your ideas. You can see my contact information here on the screen, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
To answer any questions that you may have for any of the three speakers. As you can see throughout the three presentations, it goes beyond, CMV safety goes beyond our typical engineering efforts. It's the engineering, the education, the enforcement, EMS evaluation, outreach is very important. So I encourage everyone, as you are planning your work zones, to take into consideration the impacts of the CMVs in your work zones and what else can you do to improve CMV safety in your work zones. Let's see. I do not have any questions. Let me check this chat for a minute. Nope, I don't see any questions. So with that, thank you very much to all three speakers, and back to you, Matt.
All right. Thank you, Martha. That was an excellent presentation. I really enjoyed it. We're going to take a short break. We'll come back again at exactly 2 o'clock for our next session. It's one you're not going to want to miss. So see you then.